But I think the good thing that we're seeing is a trend towards making speed a priority, making power training, making jump training, making athletic activities a priority as well, and getting away from just the max effort. How heavy can you squat? What is your 1 rep max? The leaderboards and things like that. I think you're seeing less of that. And you're seeing it, especially at the highest level, when you go to the combines and things like that. They're caring less and less about how strong those guys are.
Hey everybody, I'm your host, Anthony Renna. Welcome to episode 428 of the Strength Coach Podcast. We're talking about relevant topics with top coaches to help you become a better trainer, strength coach, therapist, or business owner. Brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. Right now, they got 20% off on all band and tubing products. And if you hurry, they're still doing the free shipping on orders over $75. So you can get your Christmas orders in. Guys, save the dates. The 3-day functional training summits have been set. Not the lineups, just the dates. Chicago, June 18th to the 20th. I'll be at that one. Long Beach, July 9th to the 11th. And Providence, August 20th to the 22nd. Check it all out at performbetter.com. Speaking of Rhode Island, today I have on Scott Leech. He's the Associate Director of Strength and Conditioning at the University of Rhode Island. He's also the founder of the Gridiron Warrior. I spoke to Scott about high school strength and conditioning coaching, not only football, just in general. He's on a mission to help high school strength coaches kind of optimize what they're doing, obviously with limited resources, and provide them with a lot of education. So I talked to him about what's the problem right now in high school strength and conditioning, some things he feels like maybe strength coaches should be subtracting because there's so much temptation to be adding things with all this technology. We talked about contact prep, what that means and when he does it. We talked about speed and what's the role of the strength coach in both off season and in season. I kind of wanted to relate that to this idea about subtracting things. His stance on bilateral and unilateral work as well as Olympic lifting. And we kind of touched on IU football right now. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal about their limited practice schedule and this idea about kind of not grinding the kids into the ground. And I just wanted to get his take on that and to see if it's going to help us change anything, because IU is number one in the country right now. And we also finished up with his site, the Gridiron Warrior. He's going to tell us all about it. The Naamly Maximizing the Member Experience segment is back for this episode. Sumit Seth from Naamly is on to talk about the mindset of so what. And that's really how sometimes there's moments in life that kind of teach you a lesson and it helps you kind of can turn into a superpower for you. So it's an interesting story about during the shutdown when he was stuck at an airport. And it can become that superpower if you first change your mindset to so what when things do get crazy. So another interesting one from Sumit. So here he is.
Welcome back to Naamly's Maximizing the Member Experience segment, where we explore the strategies and tactics that help you elevate your business and build real personalized connections at scale. Every now and then, life throws you a moment, one that teaches you something deeper than any workshop ever could. A lesson that when you internalize it, it becomes a superpower in how you lead, how you respond, and how you move forward. And that's exactly what happened to me recently. You all know that I travel a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. If Johnny Cash has been everywhere, man, I've been everywhere twice. Truth be told, I absolutely love it. Seeing clients face to face, catching up with friends, grabbing dinner with someone I've ever only Zoomed with, my Zoomy friends, that fills me up. But the trade-off, delays, cancellations, those impromptu overnight hotel stays in Terminal B, Terminal 4, and why does it always happen when I'm on the way back home? Keep in mind, this particular trip happened during the government shutdown, so flights were already reduced. Options were thin, everyone was scrambling. This one started simple, a 30-minute delay, then 90, then the announcement we all dread. Folks, your flight's been canceled. Great. I opened my laptop to hunt for anything. Another route, another city, another hotel. But with the shutdown, everything was jammed. And for a moment, my mind was spiraling. And it is about 11 o'clock in the night at this point in time. then something my friend Vince taught me came back right to the surface. A simple reframe that I go back to again and again. So what? Flights delayed? So what? Hotels sold out? So what? The whole system is backed up? So what? So what doesn't mean you stop trying. It means you stop spiraling. It's the small pause between frustration and action where you shift from, why is this happening to me, to, okay, what's my next move? And in business, especially in your gym, these moments hit all the time. A key staff member quits, a new competitor opens down the street, Facebook changes its algorithm and rules again. You can panic or you can take a breath and say, so what? And follow it up with, what's next? That pause opens the door to real solutions, stronger team structures, better referral systems, more consistent member experience. Every so what becomes a launch pad, but only if you give yourself the space. And here's the crazy part. Right after I settled into that so what Zen state, I closed my laptop, grabbed a snack, and told myself, relax, enjoy what's in front of you. And right there, out of nowhere, I heard opera in New Jersey, live opera in the middle of the terminal. 3 singers, also stranded, performing for everyone. Guys, I'm not making this up. It's too bizarre for me to invent, even if I wanted to. The song they performed was called Zidi Zidi Piano Piano. At that time, I had no idea what it meant. I just recorded it, and I looked it up after. It literally translates to quiet, quiet, slowly, slowly. And in the opera, it's done during a tense, stuck moment where the characters are trying not to lose their cool. Tell me that's not the perfect soundtrack for my night. Quiet. Slow down. Don't panic. Then decide what's next. The universe sometimes sends you a sign. Mine just happened to be in Italian, in singing. Well, that's the philosophy we live by at Naamly. Change is the only thing that's constant. In tech, in business, in fitness, in life. But when you've got the right systems behind you, communication tools, automations, engagement tracking, you stay calm, stay connected, and keep moving forward. Because so what isn't defeat. It's clarity, it's composure, it's control. And leaders who can tap into that build stronger businesses and stronger communities. So remember, so what isn't dismissive, it's direction. It's the space where better decisions live. And when you pair it with calm, intentional action, it becomes a real superpower in business and in life. If today's story helped you reframe even one challenge, share it with someone who could use that reset too. I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, stay calm, stay intentional, and keep elevating your member experience. This is Sumit signing up for now, the co-founder of Naamly. Thank you.
All right, guys, I'm here with Scott Leech. He's the Associate Director of Strength and Conditioning at the University of Rhode Island. He's also the NSCA Rhode Island State Director. He's the founder of Gridiron Warrior. At the end, we'll talk to you about that. It's kind of a community membership type site where he's helping coaches in a lot of different ways. They call him the undersized overachiever. I love that name. He's also, by the way, if you like this podcast, he does his own, the Gridiron Warrior podcast. Scott, thanks for doing this, bud.
I appreciate you having me on.
All right. Well, we got a shout out to Dan Goodman, Joe Riggio. You were on their podcast. You're actually speaking for them coming up in January at their conference, but they made the connection, and I appreciate it to you boys. So, Scotty, talk to me, because when I send out an invite for my coaches, to be on the show, it's always like, hey, you tell me, like, I never have really this agenda in terms, I'm like, what do you want to talk about? And one of the things you were talking about is I'm big on helping high school coaches, and there's a lot of coaches out there trying to do the right thing, but they don't have the education that you might have, or some of the coaches that are listening. But I always say the best products solve a problem. So I just want to ask you, what's the problem? I feel like all right, we might not be past the that's how I did it mentality, but we are in the age of information. The current crop of coaches grew up, kind of got out of school in the early 2000s, and that was 20 years ago. Wow. And so we're starting to there's really no excuse. There's a solid foundation that you can have just really by going on YouTube, not really so much social media, maybe Twitter, but talk to me about that. What's the problem? So what's the problem you're trying to solve? You say you're trying to help high school coaches, even though you're at a university. So talk to me about that.
Yeah. So, I am a Division I college strength coach, but my passion and how I try to push this thing forward or give back to people and leave an impression in the field of strength conditioning is trying to help the people that want to do the right thing. And I think there's a lot of high school coaches out there. There's a lot of small college coaches out there as well that kind of fit this category that know what maybe they did when they were in school isn't necessarily the best thing. I went to school and I remember my first conditioning test was 21 110s and you had to hit them in a certain time. And, I remember in high school reading T-Nation articles about doing prowler suicide sled sprints until you throw up. And that's what I did because I didn't know any better, and I did these ridiculous workouts that, again, I didn't have a high school strength coach. So this was just me, what I could find and what I could figure out. And not to say that anything I ever did in college was wrong or even the first couple programs I wrote as a strength coach were wrong, but as we get better, there's a better way to do things and make an impact. And honestly, in a sport, I work primarily with football, but in a sport where less people are inclined to play it and they think it's a dangerous game and it's a not safe game, I want to provide a way to make it a safe training environment and make it something that you want to be able to play for a long time and you want to do a better job at it. And honestly, just some of the ways that I've been training, some of the things we've done differently here have worked really well for us and then has transferred to the high school level as well. It's a lot of high school, whether they're the football coach that has to do it all, right? I've talked to some football coaches that are the football coach, the D coordinator, the math teacher, the after school strength coach, and they also drive the bus to the games. I've talked to that coach and said, hey, he's like, I don't have time to go back to school. I can't study for the CSCS, but I want to learn how to write a better program because I know what I've been putting on the whiteboard the past couple of years could be better. So that's where I kind of fit in, and I have provided some courses and education and resources and have just tried to be that voice for people that want to do better, not just for themselves, but for the kids. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's about, is providing a great experience for anybody out there that is trying to get better.
How long have you been at URI?
I got here in 2020, right before COVID. Thankfully, obviously I didn't know any of that was going to happen, but I'm from here. So it worked out perfectly. I got to go home, spend a little extra time with my family. I got sick of them, so we bought a house, and then we set things up, and we've been rocking and rolling here ever since.
Nice. And how long have you been working as a college strength coach?
Oh, man, my first job out of college was Merrimack with Coach Mike Kamal up there, 2015.
2015. Okay. Mike Kamal, former NBSC guy.
Yes. And then I was at Springfield College. I did my undergrad there and did my GA there in 2013 as well. Cool.
Have you seen better crop of athletes? Like, are they coming in a little bit more knowledgeable, a little bit more prepared as better movers over that last 10 years?
100%. I think the information out there is a big deal. And in the college world, what I've seen too is that kids are more connected to each other than ever. Everybody has friends that are playing sports and playing at different schools. So when you're training a kid, and if you're doing it, there are some, I'm not going to name names, but there are some schools out there that still beat the crap out of kids. They will share that story with their friends at other schools. And now in the age of the transfer portal, they don't really stay there if they're not having a fun time. So, we've heard some of those horror stories when kids come in and they're like, you're not going to make me do army crawls for 7,000 yards until I throw up. It's like, no, we're not the kind of school that does that, man. Like, we're kind of like, we train to develop you and get you better and all those things. And we do mental toughness in a way that makes sense. We don't need to just belittle you. But that's the thing. Kids are more connected than ever. They know what good training is and they know what's not good training. And they may not have all the answers. They may not be able to build it themselves, but they can look at social media and go, that doesn't seem like that's going to make me better. They're definitely smarter now than ever.
Yeah. Let's start to talk about a little bit about programming, because I like with the high school coach and I'm sure the college strength coach, there's only so much time And so it's the decisions that we make are really important from a programming perspective. And Coach Blow and I were talking about the importance of subtracting, right? We can't keep adding things, which has become increasingly harder with technology. Do you have a force plate? Do you have velocity-based training stuff? Do you do this? Do you do whatever? What are some things that you feel like strength coaches, particularly high school, maybe even college, should be subtracting? What are some of the buckets that are getting filled elsewhere that you feel like, okay, look, this bucket is overflowing. We need to concentrate on less of that and more of this?
I think the biggest shift you've kind of seen in the past few years is, and for good reason, is the emphasis on speed work. And we'll talk, I'm sure we'll talk more about speed work, but emphasis on speed work and jump training, med ball throws, power work. That's kind of what I've hung our hat on here in terms of the Gridiron Warrior stuff, is doing all those things that we know are going to do a really good job of moving the needle in the world of athleticism. I think, when I grew up, again, T Nation and Elite FTS were my top two resources. So what did I do? I lifted freaking heavy in my basement until I couldn't move. And, for better or for worse, I don't know if that made me a great athlete. So I think we've shifted away from that a little bit. Now, I don't want to ever go too far where we don't touch any weights again, because that can be an issue in itself. I think there is a balance you need to have. But I think the good thing that we're seeing is a trend towards making speed a priority, making power training, making jump training, making athletic activities a priority as well. And getting away from just the max effort. How heavy can you squat? What is your 1 rep max? The leaderboards and things like that. I think you're seeing less of that. And you're seeing it, especially at the highest level, when you go to the combines and things like that. They're caring less and less about how strong those guys are, and they're more impressed, right? What is the most important thing now at the combine? It's the 40-yard dash. And they get excited, even when the big guys are running fast, right? Nowadays, if you're an offensive lineman and you can't run under a 4.9 or something like that, 20 years ago, you'd be impressed, blown away if somebody could do that. Now it's kind of the normal, so.
Very cool. Well, that's a good segue then, because when it comes to speed, and we going back to this idea about subtraction, Coach Blow and I were talking a little bit about this, where, look, if they're practicing, the coach is actually doing that on field, or they're getting, like we talk about conditioning. We don't, maybe he's pulled back on conditioning for some because they're getting so much of that already, especially some of these kids that are doing year-round stuff. But so when it comes to speed, can you just talk about what are you doing? What's the role of the strength coach in both off-season and in-season? Talk to us about that.
So I think if you're a strength coach, this is probably one of the biggest shifts I made from early in my career to now, is when I'm planning an off-season or I'm planning a period of training, the first things I'm trying to fit into that plan is, where does the speed work fit in? Everything can kind of be built around that. So if we have an acceleration day, I know I can pair it with horizontal plyos really well. I know I can pair it with single leg training really well. If I'm doing a max V day, I know I can pair that with some more vertical stuff or some more high CNS activities. So then you start building everything around those. Whereas if you go the other way around and you care more about the strength stuff and the speed work is an afterthought, then it doesn't fit as well. You know what I'm saying there? So it's one of the things that you got to be able to prioritize and put those into place first, and then you can build everything off of that. So we always take a look at that. And in season, we always ask ourselves, what is the bare minimum we can get? It's very hard for me to say, all right, we're going to get the sleds out and do resisted sprinting or this and that, especially, their time is so limited in season. I get them after practice more often than not. So okay, where can we fit in? Can we get a couple sprints in at the beginning of practice, maybe at the end of our warm up, and we build into it, and then we let them go from there. The nice thing with GPS and things like that, if you have access to it, it can tell you exactly who needs it and how much, and you can cut back even more. But where I've seen a lot of, high school programs and what I've done with them is modify their warm up a little bit and just get a little bit, a taste of speed work. And that's plenty. I think some coaches think they need a whole dedicated piece to it. It's like, couple sprints, couple times a week actually goes a lot longer than you think.
How much are you coaching the high school coaches to talk to, and this is the high school strength coaches, because I know you said you're talking to a lot of guys that are doing everything, but how much you're coaching them to, hey, you got to go to some of these practices. You got to talk to the head coach about what are they doing from that perspective. So, because they're not going to have GPS, right? Unless they're at the, you're from New England, so they're going to have some your prep schools, but
it took us
have
like
some
4
fancy
years
stuff.
to get it here at the college level. So
Yeah.
I totally understand. The thing I tell high school coaches out there is if you are the strength coach, and it's just like anything. If you're having a difficult time with a coach, right? And the coach I saw it a lot in the hockey world. Like, let's say he bags him on the ice, right? And then you're like, he come in, I can't get any speed work done because they're always coming in gassed out from practice. Coach is always bagging them at the end of practice. The most important thing you need to do is have a conversation, right? You got to sit down and say, hey, why are you doing this? What is the reason there? And then I always tell people, you have your bubble of what's important, strength and conditioning. This is your world. This is your baby. The sport coach has their world of what's important, what's their baby. The amount of overlap you guys have is a lot smaller on that Venn diagram than you think. Sometimes you're like, oh man, they're totally messing up my bubble. They're totally messing up my Venn diagram. And they just don't know. They have so many other things that they're focused on. And the more you can kind of talk about it with each other and say, how do we come together? How do we do this? Because at the end of the day, coach, what I'm trying to do is help you win more games. And sometimes people just have a hard time having that conversation and just understanding that they're not trying to mess with you. They're not trying to do things on purpose. They're doing it because that's all they know. And I get it where you don't want to go in there and say, hey, coach, I know you've been doing this your way for 25 years, but I think your way is stupid. That's the wrong way to come about have that conversation. So there's a fine line. You got to have a good conversation. You got to approach it the right way. But when you do, you can make it doesn't take a lot. There's small tweaks, small changes, and they can go a long way.
I think too, when you have that conversation, you could say, it's always about the way, like you just said, about the way you approach it. I could say, hey, Coach Leech, look, what are some things you want to take away? I can work on some speed. I have some knowledge in that. That'll give you more time for the X's and O's out there for teaching the game your system, your game. Let me take care of this. So you could always approach it in a different way as well.
We had a high school where he really wanted to get the kids in. This is the strength coach, really wanted to get the kids in after school. And there just wasn't enough time between the transition from after school to practice. By the time they get done with practice, they got to go home and eat and do their homework. So the coach is like, I can't get him to cut his practice by a half hour to let me get them in the weight room. And I said, can he give you an extra 10 at the end of the warm up? Can you do some isometrics? Can you do a little extra activation? Can you bring some bands and med balls out there and do? He's like, I didn't even think about that. I'm like, yeah, sometimes you just got to get a little creative, but some isometrics, little speed work, do that a couple times a week. Yeah, you're not in the weight room. Ideally you get in there, you do some resistance training a couple times a week, but this is the step in the right direction. This is the first step. This goes well for a season. Then next year, maybe he gives you that half hour you need. So it's coming up with creative solutions too. And it may not be exactly what you wanted, but that's okay. You'll get there eventually if you keep at it.
I saw that you had a contact prep program, educational, a course, right?
Yep.
On your site. And that kind of along the same lines of subtracting and adding, it's like, oh man. So tell me what that is. And is that something that a strength coach really should be thinking about? Or is this something that you were doing for the high school head coach who has to take care of some of this stuff in the off season as well? Who is this for and exactly what is it?
Yeah, this is actually exactly what I'm talking about for Dan and Joe's trainer school in January down in their place in Jersey. So if anyone's in Jersey, they want to see this, we're doing a hands-on. I'm starting the day off and there's no PowerPoint. Like we're going all presentation. So, and the idea stemmed from this is when I was at Merrimack, we were in the off season and we were stuck inside. It's New England, it's snowing, it's all that. And you finish playing in Thanksgiving time, right? November-ish. And then in college, you go back out in March, right after spring break, and you start practicing again. But, if you don't have a spring like in high school, you may not be playing football again until August. That's a long period of time to not run into another human body, right? To not push, to not collide. And then we expect these kids to go full speed and be, really good at it. And what I always saw was like when we didn't do those things, when we didn't collide, there's a little hesitation in there of like, how do I get back into the mix of this? And also, for our big guys, they looked rusty the first time they went back out to practice because they weren't doing these things. So in my head, I said, there's got to be something here where we can bridge the gap between what strength and conditioning is supposed to do, right? Make you bigger, faster, stronger, to your sport. How can we get this strength to kind of fit into your sport? And that's where contact prep was born. Now, we use it a lot for like conditioning and things like that, but my course that I put together goes over how do you fit this into an entire off season. So we use it a lot, especially with our return to play guys. If you had a shoulder injury, we start on the ground. We do a lot of bear holds and stuff like that, where you're reconnecting your shoulder joint to the ground. Then we'll do some partner stuff where you're kind of like your partner's tapping you, perturbations and pushing and pulling. And then we can get into some combative stuff where now we're shoulder to shoulder and we're pushing into each other. There's a lot of application to other sports as well, like hockey. Our soccer players will do it a little bit in their warm up as like a little bump because you're going to bump into each other trying to go for a ball. And then we get into some competitive stuff as we get towards the end of that offseason to keep it fun and keep it exciting. But a lot of really good benefits there in terms of, especially at the high school level, confidence, especially because they don't wear pads year round unless maybe you're down south and you're playing spring football and stuff like that. You got to get kids comfortable being close to each other, being in each other's space. And, the football coaches, some of them out there will say, just join the wrestling team, just do that. And it's like, that's not the answer for everybody. Not everybody wants to join the wrestling team and do that. So, and that's coming from somebody who wrestled and was really good at it in high school. Like I enjoyed my time, but it wasn't for everybody, and that's okay. Where this contact prep can fit in though is for those strength coaches that have those kids in the off season, want to kind of bridge that skill gap.
Cool. So mostly it would be, it's return to play, it's off season. And then it's just kind of, how long are you kind of spending on that within a program?
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll use it if we're using it. It depends on where it fits in the program. If we're using it for conditioning, we'll use anywhere from, 8 to 10 reps, and we're pushing into each other for about 7 to 10 seconds. And we'll do a couple sets of that here and there. If it's early off season and we're doing maybe more of the bear holds and the bear calls, we can add that in as part of our warm up. So we can do those things either on cadence or, with a partner, we're going to do one set of 15 seconds, push, pull, tap, things like that. And it kind of fits in there. As long as we're kind of checking that box a little bit in the off season, I'm good. And then in the summer and things like that, when we're getting close to being, to making it count, we might use it a little bit more as a conditioning thing and just, again, increase their comfort level of being close to each other. It was actually really helpful after COVID as well, because we were away from each other for so long. And now we have to actually get back into each other's, within the bubble. So it was good.
I was talking to you earlier about, right now, there's a lot of talk about Coach Signetti at IU. And obviously I hear a lot about it because I'm in Indianapolis. But so they were basically the single losingest program in the history of top level college football. And this is actually from the Wall Street Journal. They wrote a whole article on the fact that he doesn't practice that much in a sport that caps practice time at a max of 20 hours per week. The Hoosiers typically just use 6 of those on the field. Walkthroughs before and after games are barely as long as an episode of The Office. That's a quote. Even Signetti's most arduous sessions fall well short of the 2-hour mark. So can you just comment on this? And has this been, have people been talking about this in your world, or do you think it's going to make a little bit of an impact on some of these coaches to understand that, sometimes less is more, sometimes, the importance of recovery, and maybe that, again, going back to this subtraction addition thing?
Yeah, this is one of those topics where, the old way of doing things, we knew, having gone through it ourselves, that it may not have been the best way. And we're trying to figure out what that sweet spot, what that right amount of balance is. Now there's articles like this that kind of exaggerate it a little bit. I'm going to be honest. He's probably out there for more than 6 hours, but it's the trend of let's be efficient. I think that's the word that we're trying to look for here is let's be efficient with our time and let's do the best we can. I think sometimes in the sport world, we fill this practice for 2 hours or 3 hours, partly because we are responsible for keeping the kids there. And when I was in college football, we did 2 a days because if you only practice for 3 hours, what were you going to do with the rest of your day? You might as well go back out there and do it all over again. Now we're better about, okay, with that other time, what can we do? We can do some recovery work. We can do more film work. We can do walkthrough stuff where it's not as physical, but we are still getting the review that we need. You're seeing in the NFL, and it's making its way down, is you just need to be efficient with your time, especially a sport like this where you have to use your body to practice and make sure you're in the right positions and feel good about it. You only have a limited amount of resource there. You got to manage that. And I think we're being better about, especially now, the more money on the line at the higher levels, you have to be even more mindful of the product, and you got to make sure you don't burn them out like you used to. So you're seeing that trend. I think, my good friend Tony Holler is part of that, the feed the cats philosophy of less is more. And I think the feed the cats thing works really well at the high school level, because the original principle was get those kids to come out and enjoy the sport. And when you practice for 3 hours, 4 hours, like, kids don't enjoy that. It's a grind. And the whole definition of grind is to turn somebody into dust. You don't want to do that. You don't want to make things a grind. You want to make it a fun experience. So that's the other benefit of doing these shorter, more efficient practices, is that the kids appreciate it. And they understand when there's a clarity of, like, this is why practice needs to be 90 minutes, because we're doing this, and we're getting you off your feet. So you got to give me your best. When the kids know that practice is 3 hours long, they get into survival mode and they're just trying to hang on. So it's a good trend. I like where it's going. I'm excited to see it hopefully come down to the high school level as well. I could go on and on about this. I think that the hard part for some of those coaches that can't let go, that have their 2.5 hour, 3 hour practice. And that's how we've always done it. Sometimes the American work ethic is, if you work harder and harder and harder, you're going to get rewarded. And if you lose, at least you worked really hard. And it's not the hard work. The hard work's not why you lost. And it takes confidence to practice for 90 minutes and say, I feel good about what we just did. It was efficient. It was clean. I did a good job coaching today, and I can be at peace with it. And that's a hard thing for some coaches to come around to. But I think over time, we're going to get better at that. I think practices are going to be a little bit more efficient and dialed in. Starts at the top, and it's making its way down now.
You mentioned Tony Holler. Tony changed a lot of what Coach Boyle was doing in terms of speed and really timing. What are you talking to with high school coaches specifically about? Because again, they're not going to have the timers. How are you approaching that with your teaching high school coaches, strength coaches, and coaches about how they should fit that piece of it in their speed program?
Yeah, so this is a big piece of a lot of the education stuff I put out there is, you may not have jump mats, you may not have, a plyo mat or sprint lasers or things like that, but that doesn't mean you can't do those things. And where the coaches need the help is say, how much is appropriate, how much is too much. I think too often we go on social media and we see, a coach wrote up a workout on the board, and then every strength coach feels like they need to chime in and comment about how bad it is. Well, you know what? How about you decide to be the change in the world and explain to a coach why that's not a good idea, why those percentages don't make sense, and what are appropriate numbers? Because sometimes coaches just don't know. Again, they didn't go to school for this the way that you went to school for this. So, when you just bash somebody like that, they don't get better. So what I always try to do is provide education and say, here's some really good sets and rep schemes if we're trying to get stronger. This is why we may not be doing sets of 10, but this is probably a better, if you're going to do sets of 5, here's a better sets and rep range to go with. So always trying to provide that education there and always say, you can do anywhere from here to here, and you'll know. And I think that's the biggest thing is I can't give you an exact answer, especially because every coach is different. Every program's different. The amount of kids you might have at your session is going to dictate, rest recovery intervals, but try to provide as many of those guidelines as possible, and then be there for them when they go through a session and they go, hey, this didn't really, work out, or, how do I adjust this for the next time? And I think that's one thing that I think a lot of coaches resonate with me is because I don't have a football staff of, 5 strength coaches on staff and an army of interns to help me do things. I'm lucky when all 3 of us on staff are able to work with football at the same time because we have 3 coaches. So I've been there when you're the only coach by yourself. How do you organize the room and make that work? And how do you do sets and reps, or even just from a programming standpoint, how do you plan things out when you've got one squat rack, you've got a dumbbell rack, and you got a little space over there? Those are things that, we take for granted sometimes. If you went to school for it as a strength coach, you know how to plan the room out, but sometimes as the football coach and you get there in the afternoon and you got a bunch of kids in there and you're like, how do I make this work? So instead of just bashing people on social media when you see things, try and help them out and try and, you know, they more often than not want to do it a better way. They just don't know how.
Yeah, I think too, sometimes we not overestimate, but for example, when I remember when I had my gym and a lot of this stuff was coming into this idea like of timing that speed, this, the flying tens. I wasn't using anything. I was just like, go, 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 go. Like more using coaching within that 10, to push them, or I would try to do it on the stopwatch, but it was kind of ridiculous because I'm on one side. So it was no big deal. But, and I didn't have a room. We had a hallway, like you said, we just had a hallway. So only one person could go. So sometimes when you put two kids together and you're trying, but then again, Coach Ball never really liked that. I'm pretty sure Tony Holler does, like kind of pitting them against each other a little bit. I'm not sure that, but
I do too. And here's a freebie for the coaches out there. If you don't have lasers or anything like that, you want to time the kids in the off season or find a way. We call it the you can call it a speed gauntlet or a speed contest, whatever it is, but you kind of rank the kids from fastest to slowest and you can pair them up in whatever group size makes sense. So groups of 3, groups of 5, however many you have. And so let's say you have 5 in the group, right? And you race group 1. The winner is the fastest kid. 5th place would move down to the next group of 5. The winner of group 2 moves up to group 1. Does that make sense? And you keep doing that all the way up and down. So now you may have the slowest kid on the team, but all he has to do is beat the second slowest kid on the team. He doesn't have to go win first place. He just has to win his speed group.
yeah.
So we've done that when you don't have access to lasers, and then it still creates that rank, record, publish feeling that Tony talks about. So you might do that once a week. You could do it for kind of like a 40-yard dash per se to get a little bit more of a max V effect, and then you could do a shorter one. We always had to get the cameras out like the iPhones and record the finishes because kids were getting ultra competitive on those. Every once in a while we'd throw a mix up in there where it'd be like push-up start or backwards run. The kids would get so mad when they would lose that and drop a speed group because they're like, I lost in the backwards run. That doesn't count. So again, you may not have all the technology and the resources, but that doesn't mean you still can't do these things. You just got to get a little creative.
Yeah, you got to be creative. Let's talk about one of the things we see a lot, and obviously this is Mike Boyle's my podcast. So we got to talk about back squatting, and I did hear, I think it was, I forget which podcast. I listened to a couple like snippets from different podcasts you were on, and just talking about some of the things, because we do see some of these kids, they'll do a back squat and then they'll try to get so heavy and it's a ridiculous form. So with the single leg idea, what are your thoughts on the single leg training? I know it sounded like you were on board with that, obviously, but with what are your thoughts on that, and how do you communicate that to those high school and even college strength coaches?
Yeah, so bilateral squatting is still a foundation for us in terms of what we're trying to do. I mean, our young guys, even, I say young guys, but our freshmen that come in, even if they've been at a high school program that's, squatted them and they're great squat, we'll still make them front squat for 6 months. And because I don't think there's anything wrong with having a dominant front squat. And that can transfer over to I think a great front squat transfers to a back squat, transfers to a split squat. I don't think a great back squat necessarily transfers to the other two. So we still do that first and foremost. And then, from there, our guys will do some back squatting. And I have certain numbers and standards that I'm looking for. And, I want guys to be strong. Don't get me wrong. Some people think I don't want them to be strong. I definitely want them to be strong. But, there's a lot of research out there about skill guys. Once you get into that double body weight, like, do you really need to keep pushing them? For your big guys, if I'm 300 pounds, that number is not double body weight. It's probably like 1.75, somewhere around there is probably pretty good. If you got a 300-pound lineman and they can do a ass to grass 600-pound squat, like that's more than enough, to get the job done. Start working on other skills. And that's where the split squat and the half field split squats have fit really well into our program, because they allow us, I can take a kid who has back squatted 600 pounds and now he can half field split squat 600 pounds for reps. I think he's going to get more out of that than he is necessarily the 600-pound back squat. So, it's one of the things, and I still see it even with the Hatfield split squats. The kids want to try and load those up. They want to find out, like any alpha male, they want to find out what the limit is. So, my job is to keep them safe and keep them smart and push them as hard as we can without putting them in a dangerous position there. So I think the biggest thing that we've done, and it maybe a little bit of a culture shift when I took over, is less of an emphasis on whatever that total number is, and more about, at the end of the day, is this making you a better athlete? Is this making you a better football player? So having those standards of what is considered a good squat, what is considered a good bench press is important there. But we hype up our sprint numbers, we hype up our jump numbers 1,000 times more than we hype up the big squats and the big jumps and things like that. Because at the end of the day, we've had guys go on and play in the NFL, and the best jumpers and the best sprinters are the ones that are the most athletic, and those are the guys that leave. I've had some really awesome squatters and benchers, right, that don't play past college. So, yeah, overall, I love it. I think it's a great exercise. It's a big tool in our toolbox now. At the high school level, again, you got to get better at the basics first. Like a lot of our Gridiron Warrior programs, they start out kind of simple, goblet squats and split squats and front squats. And, some high school coaches are like, Coach, when can I start teaching them back squat? When can I put that in? I'm like, if you feel good and you feel ready, you can implement it and teach it for sure, but don't let it take away from getting strong at these things first.
I think you made a great point, understanding like what is the emphasis you're putting on as a coach. So you said you're hyping up the speed and the vertical jump, right? So hey, when they're new to this stuff, so they're looking at it like, I want to impress coach. And when you're putting the emphasis on those, now the emphasis now comes off of some of those, you got to do X amount, or in this program, cool, I'm worried about my speed, I'm worried about my vertical jump, so what can I do to help get those better? So I think it's an important part from the coach's perspective, is like, what are you emphasizing that's going to trickle down?
And that's been the great thing about VBT too. That's just another tool to use to emphasize, hey, moving this heavy weight fast is more important than finding out how heavy you can go. And telling kids, I get more excited when you move at 1.0 meters per second, move this weight or that weight. I care more about that than seeing what the limit is and it looks slow and looks sloppy. And, sometimes I feel so bad. Sometimes the kids go too heavy and they're like, Coach, how'd that look? And I give them the disappointed look, and they're just, it crushes them because they were hoping to be excited about it. And I'm like, I'm not excited about things looking bad and sloppy, man. I'm excited about you looking like an animal, and sometimes the heavy stuff just doesn't look as athletic or look as alpha as moving some stuff fast and explosive.
Well, speaking of that, I know you said you got away from some of the Olympic lifts. So tell me your stance on Olympic lifts, and why you've kind of moved away from them, and the backlash that you might have gotten on Twitter, because even Coach Boyle, well, it's because you can't coach those lifts, Coach Boyle. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so Coach came down and I did a presentation. He came down to Rhody. We did a clinic here, and I did a presentation on loaded jump training because it's something that I've cut out of our program. Do we still mix some high pulls in with our advanced guys? Yeah, we'll still throw some high pulls around. We'll do some stuff off the floor. I'm a big believer in jerks and overhead stuff still. Now, a lot of variations, right? A lot of landmine stuff. We have the Viking press as well. So we'll still mix things like that in there. But hand cleans and power cleans have been taken out of the program, and more often than not have just been replaced with loaded jumps, simply from the fact that it in my opinion, for a large group, it's easier to teach. It's faster to implement. It's very hard to mess up. It pairs very well with vertical jump training that is usually contrasted with it. It's scalable. It's programmable. I can do it out of different stances if I want to do maybe a stagger stance or things like that. If I want to emphasize it, the landing more so than the jump ball or the takeoff. And then, we've taken it to the next level here, and we've actually created load power profiles. So we have every kid jump with different weights, and we find out what weight on the bar is going to produce the peak power for them. And my research has found that, for a wide receiver, it might be 60 to 65% of their body weight. For an offensive lineman, it might be closer to 30, 35%, because you have to factor in the amount of weight that they're lifting off the ground just to jump in the first place. So, it has allowed us to really scale in our programming better. And I think you get a better force output. Now you combine it with VBT or you combine it with a jump mat. Now you're getting a competitive factor. You're getting more intent out of your athletes. And I think you get a better training response than just Olympic lifting alone. Now, don't get me wrong. I think throwing around some Olympic lifts and catching some heavy cleans, I'm a big vibes kind of guy. Like there's something alpha and dominant about that. Don't get me wrong. But we found a way to make it work with loaded jumps in our program. And that's okay.
It goes back to what you were talking about earlier, and I had said, that's the way we've always done it, or just kind of looking, or just copying programs. Like you have to be flexible, you have to be open-minded, and find some other ways that you can fit things in, concepts in, within your program and what you have. And Coach Boyle and I talk a lot about logistics sometimes. It's like these are other factors that are involved. So, I want to talk about another thing that Coach Boyle, again, we were talking about this last time, and he was saying a lot of people will give him shit because they'll say, you're just doing that to make money. And he's like, sometimes, yeah, it's okay to make money. I want a facility that is making money. And people don't understand. Some people have asked me, like, why do you have a business segment on? It's the Strength Coach podcast. Or today we have on maximizing the member experience segment with Naamly, and they're going to talk about some different things. And I just think it's important to educate strength coaches on this thing, because a lot of times they don't make enough money and they want to get out of it. They'll either retire. And I'm like, well, there's other things you can do. We're on this podcast right now because for that reason, I found a ceiling in personal training at 20 years ago, and like, what can I do to add additional revenue, different income streams to my life, so I can still train because I love doing it, but I can make a little money here, make a little money there. So you've done a good job with that in terms of, having some programs, having some courses. You have a, I know I didn't see any details on it, but next summer you're doing your own conference, right? Yep. I know you put them together for NSCA, or you're the lead for NSCA in Rhode Island. So talk to me about, like, what advice are you going to give some strength coaches out there, college strength coaches, high school strength coaches, to say, hey, there's some other things you can do to kind of keep yourself in the game. How did you approach that? And what's your advice to those coaches?
Yeah. So first thing I say is if you're in a director role, or if you're in a position of authority, if you have power to try and make things better for the next group of strength coaches, that's your responsibility. I see nothing grinds my gears more than going on social media and you see another low paying assistant position, and the first thing that everybody does is bash the school, or bash the if they know the head strength coach, they'll tag them and say, this is embarrassing, why did you do that? And it's like, do I want to do that? Do you think he wanted to post a position with that low of a pay? It's like, have some common sense. Like, we're doing everything. If you care about your staff. And now, example here, we started with 2 less positions than what I have now. And both those positions have been 12, 13, 14 grand increases since I've got here, because the number one fight I've had is, I said, we need better people. We need more people. And we need to take care of those people appropriately. Now, do I think they get paid enough? No, I don't. I still think they need more, and I'm going to continue to fight for them and advocate for them. But, it's a heck of a lot more than I made when I first got in. And, it's one of those things. It's very easy to say, well, just cut your teeth and pay your dues. But it's, once you're in this position, it's your responsibility to make it better for the next group. And you can't just say, well, I had it hard, so they should have it hard too. That's the wrong answer there. So that's always my soapbox on that piece there. I think if you have an opportunity to make things better for the next generation, let's do it. But what I always tell people is say, in the meantime, right? So if you do take one of those positions, you're in that entry level, you're the beginning strength coach. I think the sooner you realize that no one is coming to save you, the better. If you are constantly waiting for your boss to go upstairs and get you a raise, if you're constantly waiting for the next job or the better job to open up, you are missing out on an opportunity to work on your skills, develop yourself, and get better. And that's where some of these courses first started is, I asked to speak at a NSCA clinic, and it turned into, okay, organize a presentation and present for an hour. And then some people really liked that, and they said, can you send me your presentation? I said, sure, I don't mind doing that. And then, I kept putting this together, kept putting programs together for my friends that are high school strength coaches. And they're like, hey, what should I do in the off season? What's a better way to do it? And what I've always done to justify the price, or to, at least in my head, is tell myself, if I'm going to take time away from my family to design programs, if I'm going to spend, after I put my kid to bed, if I'm going to spend an hour or two on the computer, my wife is working on her business as well. So we're there together, but we're not spending the real quality time together. If I'm going to make that sacrifice for my family, it better financially be worth it. So if I'm going to take a day in the summer to organize and run a clinic and be there all day to do that, then financially, I don't feel bad about charging people and making money off of that, because I took an entire day away from my family where we could have done something together. So it's one of those things where, as strength coaches, we have a lot of fears and issues that we got to work out when it comes to making money. But if you work hard and you put a great product out there, you deserve it. So don't be afraid to charge prices. It's one of the things that Dan and Joe have helped me out a lot with, is growing my group and growing my community, because I've put so much stuff out there, and they're like, hey, if you're going to keep doing this and you're going to keep providing more and more, you got to be able to ask people for money, because you're providing a lot of content and it's worth it. So don't be afraid to charge. Don't be afraid to value yourself, because that's what it is at the end of the day.
It's interesting how the whole industry, whether it's personal trainers, strength coaches, kind of have that imposter syndrome and don't always believe in the value of that type of thing, right? Of having these products, and then they go on and they're like, oh, you're selling out, and we're still seeing that after all this time. Like Coach Boyle was still, I literally had a clip of him. One of the clips is going to be about that, like one of our snippets from our last show. It's kind of ridiculous that you're still dealing with those kind of comments, like, that's why you're doing it for the money, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, but there's other things. We do need to charge for this is a job as well. We need to make money. We you spend a lot of time on education. I can't tell you how many times, how many courses I went to, how many different things that I went to just try to be better. And so, but you still got to convince yourself sometimes,
And I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that consider me a sellout strength coach because I'm selling this on the side, or I'm always promoting this or that. And you know what? There's always going to be people that are upset with you. There's always going to be people. That's fine. That's their prerogative. Because I've done this, because I've sold myself, because I put myself out there, I've been able to help out way more people than I would have ever been able to do if I just tried to do it for free or do it. I'd still be in a position where I can't financially take care of myself, and my family. I wouldn't be able to help as many people as I can help now. So there's always going to be somebody that doesn't agree with you, and that's okay. As long as you're doing what you think is best and you're doing it to take care of your family and help others, then who cares what they think?
I always go back to Michael Gervais wrote a book called The First Step to Mastery is to Stop Worrying About What Other People Think. That was the title of the book. You almost you don't even need to read the book if you really truly understand that and you kind of take that advice, like just do your thing. And it's funny because everybody who's kind of made it in that piece. There's a guy named Ryan McGinn. He's a big social media, he films videos for people. He helps people with he's helped all the top people, Tony Robbins and Grant Cardone, blah, blah, blah. And I saw him speak and he was just like, don't even listen. Don't even read the comments. Just do your thing. Just post every day. Don't read the comments. Stop worrying about answering and whatever. Like get those haters, because that means you are expressing your opinion, because not everybody's going to agree with you. So it's kind of interesting that we, we go in this direction of trying to please everybody.
Yeah. The last thing I always tell people too, if you're a college strength coach or whatever out there, is lean into it. If you like to power lift on your own time, write some powerlifting programs, put them out there on Train Heroic or whatever it may be, and see how it goes. I have one of my assistants has done Ironmans and triathlons. Lean into that, build out some programs, put a program or a educational course out there about how to run your first triathlon. If you sell it for $1, you sold it for $1, but at least you did something. At least you took your passion and built something and learned some skills along the way, and it's going to transfer into something down the road for you.
Very cool. Let's take the last minute. Speaking of business, tell us what is the Gridiron Warrior? And who it's for, and what they're going to get if they sign up.
Yeah, so Gridiron Warrior Insiders is my new home host of everything that I've got going on. We have the contact prep courses and scores and stops and the Gridiron Warrior off-season program, which is a full 12-week thing. And more than just a program, I try and provide the coaches the why and the education behind it so that they can make the tweaks and changes needed at their school, at their level. But Insiders is a little bit more access to me, so inside there, once a week, I jump on a live and it's Q&A. So if you have any questions, I answer them, but I have a plan that day too. So if I don't have any questions, I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. So it's an opportunity to talk to me. I have the Wildcat webinar. So once a month, I have somebody else come in and run the offense for me, and they do a guest lecture type presentation. We have the podcast. So any early episodes, the insiders get to watch those months before everyone else. They get early access on those. And then I only partner with brands and companies that are going to help coaches. So inside there, we have the equipment room. And if you ever need anything, where do you go? You go to the equipment room. So the equipment room has access to discounts and things like that are going to help those coaches, whether it's, supplements or equipment itself and things like that. And then all that kind of ties in together. And then a discount, like I said, on our strength coach / football conference that we're putting together this summer. So if anyone is in Rhode Island or in the New England area, you work with football, stay tuned for that. That's going to be a really cool thing this summer.
Very cool, Coach. Thanks for doing this. Really appreciate you. We were talking earlier. You understand sometimes with the podcast. It's like I just so everybody knows, I text Scott on I think Sunday, and today's Tuesday. So I really appreciate you doing this right before the holiday. But love what you're doing. Great stuff. Thanks for doing it, and hopefully we'll get you on in the future.
Appreciate you having me.